A pleasure to have joining us on today's edition of VLGA Connect, Professor Veena Sahajwalla from the University of New South Wales. Veena, lovely to see you.
Chris, great to chat to you again.
So Veena was part of our fast track panel earlier in the year. Gosh, it just feels like so long ago now, so much has happened, talking about the circular economy. And we thought it would be good to catch up, particularly in light of the federal government's announcement about the new recycling fund this week. Veena, you, I assume, welcome the announcement that's been made by the federal minister?
Yes, absolutely. It's a very welcome announcement that Minister Susan Lee has made. I think to all of us in this world of recycling, it's got to be a real positive, because I think, to me, you sometimes have to look at announcements like that and really plan a whole new future in this world of recycling. And it's going to give us that momentum that we so need.
So we should point out there's a lot of details still to come, and local government is certainly waiting to see some specifics. But the headline is $190 million of federal investment. It's expected to unlock another possibly $600 million of investment. And the aim is to transform waste and recycling capacity. So in terms of what we know so far, Veena, I know you've talked and worked a lot in this space for a long time now. Can you see your influence in the announcement that's been made? And you happy with the direction the federal government's taking?
Yeah, look, absolutely. From our point of view, I mean, we've always been talking about our ability to have micro factories, which is one of our inventions, enabling capacity in the regions. So the fact that you can have, micro factories that are processing waste that can be located and in a distributed capacity way, enable, regional areas to also, be a part of this whole new recycling economy. And I think, to me, this is really what this is about. It's all about creating a whole new economy that's built around recycling. So, to me, the fact that federal government has put out this announcement, that also shows that ultimately it's not just about large metro cities, doing recycling and having, trucks of waste materials, going to some centralized facility, but it's really about looking at different ways in which we can create business models that make economic sense. So, if I'm going to have to pay for long distance transport, I'm probably better off using the amount of money that I'd have put into transport, investing that in building local capacity for recycling. Because the all important thing that you can then do as a result of that is create local jobs. So I think, to me, the obvious connectivity with all of that is, in addition to recycling, diverting waste away from landfill, that capacity that we would then create as a result of decentralization will enable jobs to be created as well.
So we understand that COAG has determined that certain types of waste will be banned from being exported from, I think it's next year sometime. Is that what's being dealt with here in terms of creating new opportunities to use those waste streams, and is it going far enough?
Yeah, look, I think on the COAG's ban list, as we all know, from next year, we're going to start to see export bans coming into effect for plastics, paper, glass, and tires. So I think with these 4 items, it's actually putting out there very clear policy settings for everyone in this business to really prepare. Now, from the context of what we have to do is we have to actually build capacity and, of course, look at new market opportunities. That doesn't mean that you've got to only be fixated with existing markets of converting one plastic into exactly the same plastic again, but rather saying, if I had diverse opportunities in the marketplace, could I be putting many of my materials into building applications, for instance? So that's about creating new market opportunities. And that's really what this announcement can potentially lead to, is saying that these items, which are now banned from being exported from next year onwards, can actually be diverted into new production capacity, new markets right here in Australia. So if you can imagine our built environment sector, and I take this example because some of the products that we've created out of waste, glass and textiles have actually already been trialed and are being prototyped in display apartments that Mirvac has got right here in Sydney. So it just is showing us that we've gone beyond the phase of talking, and we're saying, right, in partnership and collaboration, we can actually work together and saying that the supply chains could absolutely be targeting a whole new end market. And in this case, if it is around building materials, then to be able to work with end users, property market, to be able to say, how can some of our products become useful in a whole new way? But I think that's really what it's about. It's about all of us realizing we need to be innovative and really, really clever in recognizing the value in our materials, so we don't put them into landfill, but rather put them into applications.
So we've talked about this before, and it's stayed with me since the day you spoke on our panel around the level of imagination and innovation that's going to be required. Do we have the right conditions in place for that imagination to start to happen, do you think?
Yeah, I think researchers in Australia are absolutely brilliant in leading the world in so many respects, in looking at their creative, whether it's around the science, the engineering, about the chemistry. I think for all of us collectively to say there's a lot of fabulous research that's happening in our universities and CSIRO. Let's pool all of that together. And let's work together to say some of us might be good at science, some might be good at engineering and technology development. But collectively, what that then means is that we've got actually the grunt and the intellectual power to actually translate a lot of that research into practice. And that's the important thing here, because when we start to translate all of that research into application, then we'll start to see benefits for end users. And this is exactly what we have to do. No one can do it in isolation. We can do it together in a collective way. So for me, this recycling economy and this opportunity that presents itself through this recycling fund is really about businesses and governments actually now working with, the research sector and saying, look, can we actually work together to be able to take a lot of those brilliant ideas and really accelerate that transition? So that transition doesn't have to take a long time. If there is research that shows that the technology can be translated and brought to life in practice, our example of our microfactories, we've been running these microfactories in UNSW for the last couple of years. And that has meant that for industry partners, it's about actually accelerating that transition into their application. And that's really how we should see this entire journey of partnership and collaboration.
So what about e-waste? A lot of people are concerned about e-waste. Now, I know it's not mentioned in this particular announcement from the federal government, but in Victoria, as you're aware, for some time now, e-waste cannot go to landfill. So how is that particularly going to be dealt with, do you think?
Yeah, e-waste is a really, really good example of, really talk about value and materials that have inherently high value that's present in our electronic waste. So whether we're talking about our computers, our, electronic devices in our homes, in every of the things that we have, even our little old humble remote control, right? That's got plastic casing around it, and our printers and all of these things, we might look at it as a waste, but actually all that plastic and metal, if you had to sort of collectively talk about what's there in our e-waste, and of course, not to mention a lot of high quality glass, right? So if you then break it up and say all these materials are indeed high value, and we should not be downgrading it and simply just mixing it all up and calling it a waste, because that would mean absolutely that we're not taking economic advantage of the value that's there in resources. And this is where, of course, we can see these materials in our electronic devices as renewable materials. So even if you go back to the basics like metals, copper, for example, why would you not process copper right here in Australia? Why would you not see this as an opportunity to create high quality copper alloys for different applications? Doesn't have to go back into electronics. It could go into so many other ways in which copper can be utilized. Right? Copper is an extremely valuable material. And of course, the list goes on. And then you've got, of course, materials like, for instance, zinc that's there in our disposable batteries, right? So, you could literally look into this treasure, cove that we have of electronics and start to list precious metals as well. You start to add to that. Why would you not again have a decentralized system of modular setups, which is effectively how we're talking about microfactories coming to life? They're affordable modules. Not everyone has to solve every problem. The collective us together means that someone could focus on plastics, somebody else could focus on copper, and somebody else could focus on glass. That ability to collectively say we can solve this problem so that each one of us can come out as winners out of this equation. Means government could play a very important role. Victorian government, local government association, I can imagine, could play a role that says, look, we will manage how these materials are being moved around, but ultimately to make sure that the most value added pathway is adopted. And that's really the critical thing for the economy, to be able to bring those jobs in Victoria from these materials, of course, that cannot go to landfill anymore.
Just want to touch on, if you're able to, before we wrap up, Veena, your work with the ARC research hubs. I understand you've got a second one starting, which I think might be fairly unique. You've had the Green Manufacturing Hub, which is coming to an end soon, am I right?
Yeah.
And then you're into batteries. Just give us a brief update on how that's been working for you.
Yeah, that's actually been really tremendous. I mean, look at our industry partners, people who've come in, whether they're from the e-waste sector or indeed from manufacturing sector. For us, the important part of that experience has shown that these industry partners who have seen the benefits out of doing green manufacturing, but now clearly as times are moving forward and we're all recognizing that products like batteries have become a matter of urgency, as we all would agree, that we do need, again, onshore processing capacity. Across Australia, we're going to always have batteries, whether they're coming from our cars or whether they're coming from, again, that simple old remote control. I mean, we've got disposable batteries, the small ones to the large ones. And we all recognize that this is here to stay. We've talked about energy, renewable energy, we've talked about energy storage. So the fact that understanding the role of batteries and how important they are in our economy is going to become even more critical moving forward, which means all the materials that are there in the making of a battery, whether we talk about our lithium ion batteries, which might have our lithium, cobalt, manganese, and so on, or indeed nickel-based batteries. Again, all these elements are important, because without those elements, without those basic building blocks, we're not going to be able to make the product. So it's really important for us, as part of our move forward, is to recognize that these batteries that currently might not be processed here to extract the full value, it's not enough to say, well, we've just, collected it and done some initial processing and then it's shipped off somewhere else. That's clearly not enough, because we're sending away the most valuable resource, somewhere else. Whereas if we can imagine, if we were doing the entire processing here, there's nothing stopping us from imagining a future where the materials could then become part of a battery production facility in Australia. And so I think, again, it doesn't have to be one facility. It could be a whole range of facilities, different people processing different elements. And of course, that then triggers off the ability to manufacture batteries, because we will be sitting literally on a mine full of elements that are all the critical elements that we need for manufacturing in Australia. And no reason why we shouldn't be manufacturing batteries. And indeed, let's imagine a future where we could be exporting some of these elements to others overseas.
So many parts to the puzzle, aren't they? But it's always inspirational to speak with you, Veena. Really appreciate your time. And we look forward to seeing the next level of detail with the announcement that's come from the federal government this week, particularly as it relates to how local government can play its part. Open invitation, always happy to chat with you. And I'm sure there'll be more opportunities in the not too distant future. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris.
We've been speaking with Professor Veena Sahajwalla from the University of New South Wales on today's edition of VLGA Connect.